Right. Is this thing on? Thanks, Nicole. Nicole asked if she could cheer for me, and I said absolutely. Encouraged that you would. Please give me some street cred around here. I think I'm going to hold my notes because I feel like if I put them on that stand, they won't be there for long. Okay, I was given the topic lies about being a Christian. So that's easy, right? So yeah, I thought a lot about this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories that Jesus told, what I think that tells us about God, and what I think it tells us about how we often miss what it means to be a Christian. So Jesus tells a story in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15. So if you have that, you can pick it up. What? You can look it up and follow along, because we'll kind of be going through piece by piece. So Luke opens the story like this. He says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.' Then Jesus told them this parable." So the scene is kind of a bunch of sinners huddled in close to Jesus, much like kind of right now. And then a bunch of Pharisees. What is my child? Jam needs to go. I was like, my child's done something wrong. Wrong enough that she needs to get me from speaking. Yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Okay, yeah, so much like what I was saying, much like right now, sinners right here in this area, Pharisees kind of in the back judging everyone up here, Garrett. And so Jesus, they're muttering of "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them," prompts Jesus to tell the following stories. He tells three. He tells a story of a shepherd who went out to find one lost sheep. He tells a story of a woman who searched diligently for one lost coin. And then he tells of a father who gets to bring home his lost son. And that's the one that we're going to talk about today. He says, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.'" Now, you've probably heard this, but if you haven't, it's important that this was like an enormous slap in the face. Like, this was equal to saying, "I wish you were dead. You're only good for your money. So go ahead and just give me what you're worth." So this was an enormous deal. First of all, you didn't leave your family. And second of all, you definitely didn't ask for anything if you left. And you certainly didn't ask for your inheritance. Nevertheless, the father concedes and he divides up his property and gives him his share. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country, and then squandered his wealth in wild living. And you can probably imagine what would go into wild living. And can you imagine how angry as a parent you would be that you spent forever building this wealth to hand to your children, and then this son basically spitting in your face and then blowing it on prostitutes and God knows what else? Oh. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So he had no money, no food. He was feeding these pigs, and he was so hungry that he wished that he could eat even what they were eating. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired hands.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him." This is showing us not an angry, bitter, resentful father at a son who cursed him and left him with pain and dishonor, but this is showing us a father who misses his son so dearly that he's scanning the horizon every day to see if he might be coming home. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. And I didn't know this until yesterday, but in the ancient Near East, patriarchs don't run, apparently. I meant to quote some of my resources. So a couple of resources that helped me shape a lot of my thoughts and get some of these tidbits of information. Timothy Keller has a book called Prodigal God that is so good. I read that a few years ago. But then I also listened to a sermon by Marty Solomon, and he has a Bema podcast. It's BEMA. Amazing. So if you want something like that, he's got it. But he was talking about this. Jewish patriarchs don't run. Like once you get to a certain age, you don't run, which I think we can relate to. Right? Like kids run everywhere they go. Doesn't matter what they're doing. They are running to get there. Junior high kids, they still run. They still run. High school kids, they don't run very often. And then gradually you just get to a point where you're like, I don't run anymore. I haven't ran in years. But Jewish patriarchs don't run. And Marty Solomon told this story about his friend went over there and he was interviewing a guy and asking him about Jewish patriarchy. And he asked him specifically about running and if he would ever run. And he said, no, I would absolutely under no circumstances ever run. That is extremely degrading, humiliating. That is not something that we do. And then he followed up with a question, but what if your child is drowning? And the only way that you could save him was you would have to dead sprint to save him. And he said the man didn't say a word, and just a tear rolled down his eyes. It's that significant of a thing that wouldn't be like, yes, absolutely. That it was that big of a degrading, humiliating thing to run. But he runs out to his son, and his son starts the speech. But the big thing there is that our God is a God that runs. Our Father runs to us. No matter the degrading, no matter the humiliating, he's willing to run just to embrace us. But he runs out to his son starts his speech. I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And the father interrupts him and is basically like, yeah, enough of that. Grab the best robe, put on the best ring, give him some shoes because this is my son. Those were all signs of sonship. The village would have disowned him. So Leviticus actually gives them the right to stone him, but they had kind of moved past that, and they would have for sure disowned him. He was not allowed to be a part of their community anymore. But this father runs out to meet him and then says, no, this is my son, and I'm bringing him home. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine is dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. What an awesome father that is. And you know that at this point in the story, the tax collectors and the sinners were leaning in and thinking, I thought I was out. I thought I wasn't allowed in. I thought he didn't want me. I thought I wasn't welcome home. I'm lost, but he wants me home, and I'm allowed to come home. And so to those of you that are here today that might be feeling that I'm lost, don't wonder whether you can come home or not. Because with our Father, the answer is always a resounding yes. Yes, you can come home. Yes, come home. This is a Father who runs, and he will surely run to you if you start your walk home. But Jesus wasn't done with the story yet. In fact, he really hadn't even gotten to the main punch of the story, which was the part of the story that was for the people in the back. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing, so he called one of the servants and asked him, "What's going on? Your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound." The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, All these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, we won't even call him his brother, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So the question that I've been pondering a lot lately, even before this, is just what does it mean to be a Christian? And don't rush to answer it, because I think we simplify it. And we're like, well, it's obviously, you confess and believe. Okay, well, Jesus said even the demons believe that I'm the Son of God. Well, yeah, but you got to have faith and works. Okay, well, what does that look like? How much of each? What's the percentage points there? I think we make it so simple. Don't do that. I want you to write that question down, and I want you to think about what does it mean to be a Christian? Because sometimes I think we get it really wrong. The Pharisees got it wrong, what it meant to be the people of God. They got it wrong. They were supposed to know God. They were the righteous ones. They were in, so they thought. But they got it all wrong. What does it mean to be a Christian? Jesus told the story for the sinners, certainly, but he was prompted by the Pharisees, and he told it more so for them, I believe. They thought they were in. They thought they got it. They scoffed at these sinners in front of Jesus, and how could Jesus even be close to them? They were in, the sinners were out, and Jesus basically says, they're a lot closer to in than you think they are. And they're actually a lot closer than you are, too. Ouch. At the end of this story, who was in the party and who wasn't? The younger brother was in the party, and the older brother was standing outside. So this story kind of forces us to take stock of who are we in the story? Which category do we fall into? And certainly I think we probably have some younger brothers here. And I hope that they'll decide to make the walk back home, but probably more so in this kind of assembly. We're more at risk for the older brother category. So here are some of my thoughts about all of this. Sometimes we can believe that because we say we're Christians, we're in and others are out. That's a lie. Sometimes we can believe that because we say we're Christians, we're in and others are out. That's a lie. The title of Pharisee did not put them in. They didn't get to go to the party. They knew the scripture way more than any of us combined. More than we could even imagine. They had whole books of the Bible memorized. Imagine Genesis memorized from top to bottom. We're not even close. We're not even close to there. They thought they had the title that meant they were the people of God, but Jesus said they weren't. You diligently study the scriptures because you think that by them you possess eternal life. These are the scriptures that testify about me. But you refuse to come to me to have life. You refuse to come to the party. The title of Christian means nothing. The knowing of Scripture ends up meaning very little, apparently. Man looks at the outside, God looks at the heart. Being a Christian is more than a title, more than a belief statement, and more than what we know about God. Sometimes we can believe that being a Christian is about being good. That's a lie. Sometimes we can believe that being a Christian is about being good. That's a lie. The older son was good. All these years I've been slaving for you, and I never disobeyed your orders. He was good, but he's outside the party. The Pharisees were good, but Jesus called them whitewashed tombs. He said, you look really beautiful on the outside, but on the inside, you're just a bunch of dead bones. Does goodness matter? Yes. Yes, it matters. The scripture says, let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Your goodness matters. God is redeeming the world, but we're not good just to be good. Jesus is telling the Pharisees, your goodness is keeping you out of the party. You're so right. You're so good. You have it all figured out. But that's actually landed you outside the kingdom. You think this is about being good, but it's about knowing me and becoming like me and celebrating what is good. I think God is far less concerned about who you are today and what you did yesterday than he is about who you're becoming. And if you're a parent, you can relate to this. Ryan is 2, and she's been trying out lots of different ways to throw fits this year. Her latest one is just this piercing, fake cry. And then she lays flat on the ground. I'm like, what is happening? That happened a couple times this weekend. But I'm not that concerned about that because she's becoming somebody who doesn't throw fits. That's what we're working on. And I believe she'll get there. Because throwing a fit in my house doesn't make your life better. The opposite is sure to happen. You can go to bed if you're going to do that, which is the worst thing you can do to a toddler, apparently. Tyler tells me to go to my room, and I'm like, yes, I would love to. Thank you. I will go to bed. Thank you. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about who she's becoming. We'll get there. And I don't love her any more or less if she throws a fit today. It's not about me. I'm worried about who she's becoming. And that's for her, not for me. I can walk that road with her. And if she's living in my house and in relationship with me, then I get to work alongside her to help her become who God created her to be. And that's the goal. It's not about their goodness. They don't have to be good to live in my house. That matters very little to me. There's not even a question of whether they belong there. They don't have to be good for me to love them. Not even a question. But as they live in my house, we'll work together to help them become who they were created to be. Do you understand that? Do you get how that's what God thinks about and looks at when he looks at us? God is making the whole world new. He says that in Revelations 21, and part of that process is us, is making us new. In Ezekiel, he says, I'm going to put in you a new heart and a new spirit, and we're going to do this thing from the inside out. We talk about the fruit of the Spirit, love and joy and hope and peace and patience, and we talk about how we can be all those things, and I don't think that's bad, but whose fruit is it? It's the fruit of the Spirit. It's not our fruit. It's the fruit of the Spirit. It's his work that lives in us that will bring that about. Philippians 2, it's God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purpose. Whose work is it? It's God's work in you. It's not about goodness, but as we live in the Father's house and as we relate to him, he will do his molding work in us. So the question is, who are you becoming? Because the Pharisees were the people of God, but they were becoming less and less like God. And these sinners were not the people of God, but they were becoming more and more like God, and that's actually what mattered. Being a Christian is deeper than being good. Sometimes we can believe that being a Christian means we're just trying to escape this horrible place called earth and get our reward in heaven. That's a lie. This son was waiting for more. He was waiting for his reward. You never even gave me a single young goat to celebrate with my friends. And the father's like, what do you mean? You're always with me. And everything I have is yours. Jesus is the reward. Jesus is where life is. He said, I've come so that they may have life and have it to the full. He told the Pharisees, you look for life in the scriptures, but life is in me. John's beautiful picture of heaven in Revelations 21, the main piece of heaven is that God will live with man. That's the big thing, that God's home will be with us. And Jesus offers that right now, right? At least in some capacity, we have that right now. He said, surely I will be with you always till the very end. So this life to the full, this life that Jesus offers isn't just about life after death. If you think that, you've missed it. It's not about some future reward that we're slaving away for. I believe that Jesus wants to offer a real life here and now. And that living in the Father's house and enjoying what he has to offer is the key to that full life. But the older son didn't recognize the gift of being with his father. He didn't recognize the gift of being with his father. And I fear that we too might not recognize the gift of being in the Father's house. I fear we too might not recognize that we aren't slaves following orders, but that we are sons living a beautiful way of life handed down to us. I'm so thankful for the wisdom and the way of life that my parents handed down to me, especially now as I look back, that they taught me to say no to the party scene. They taught me to say no to promiscuity. They taught me to say no to greed. They taught me to say no to Satan's schemes, no to lying. And they taught me to say yes to love, and yes to forgiveness, and yes to generosity, and yes to God's way of doing things. And I didn't do all of that perfectly, but that's the life that was handed to me, and that's the life that I pursued. And in return, I don't have many regrets from growing up. I mean, we all do, but I don't have any significant things. I don't live in the consequences of those kinds of decisions. And on the flip side, I really get to enjoy a really full life, full of blessings and relationships and purpose. And so I love living in my Father's house. I don't still live in my Father's house, but metaphorically, I love living in my Father's house. I love that I enjoy a deep relationship with my dad, that we connect consistently. I love that. I love the way of life that he handed down to me, and that I get to live those blessings in that life every day. And that's the way we should feel about God. We don't begrudge this way of life that he handed us. We aren't slaves earning our salvation. We are offered an opportunity to live in a more beautiful, more fulfilling way. And that is a reward. That is a good thing. Love and joy and forgiveness and hope and peace and generosity and humility and grace are so much better than hate and grudges and anger and bitterness and selfishness and greed and despair, aren't they? Is that what we want? The reward is being in the Father's house and enjoying what the Father has to offer. All that I have is yours. And what is his? Love and joy and hope and peace and grace and humility and forgiveness. Lastly, sometimes we forget what we're here for. Jesus, I learned this yesterday, so I'm not brilliant. Jesus was telling an old story. He was retelling an old story, one that the Pharisees would have 100% picked up on because they knew their Bibles really well, and this was a Jewish way of doing things. They would say things to kind of hearken back to other stories and other lessons that had already been told and build upon them. There's another story in Genesis about two sons and about the younger son stealing a birthright and wrongfully getting the inheritance and then leaving and coming home. And it's the story of Isaac and Esau and Jacob. And so Jacob steals Esau's birthright and his blessing, and because he's afraid he's going to get killed, he gets out of town. Well, then eventually God tells him to come back. And he's really scared about Esau. And so he makes kind of all these preparation and plans because he sees Esau coming with 400 men. And he's like, okay, I'm done. But he gets his speech together. He's got his plan together. This is what we're going to do. And I'm going to go first. And I'm going to bow this many times. And then you guys are going to follow me in the next group and the next group. But while he was a long way off, it says, Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him. Doesn't that sound familiar? Luke 15:20. But while he was a long way off, his father saw him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Pretty much word for word, the same thing. The Pharisees would have picked up on this. Esau was the older brother, and he ran. Esau was the older brother, and he ran, and he threw his arms around the younger brother, and he kissed him. Jesus is saying to the older brothers in the crowd, the Pharisees, hey, this is your job. What I'm doing in this story, it's your job. You know the story. You're the ones supposed to be running out. You're the ones supposed to be throwing the arms and doing the kissing. He's my son, but he's your brother. And this is where you're supposed to come in. But you were too busy thinking you were in. You were too busy being good. You were too busy waiting for your future reward that you failed to play your part. Jesus tells 3 stories: a shepherd finding a lost sheep and celebrating, a woman finding a lost coin and celebrating, a father receiving his lost son and celebrating. Being a Christian is more than saying you are. It's more than working hard to better yourself. It's more than being a nice person. Being a Christian is about finding lost things and bringing them home. That's our job. Don't miss your part in the story. And I'm not going to lay out exactly what that looks like. I was going to have some practical things here, but Jesus didn't do that. I gave you a lot more than Jesus did. I should have just read the story and been like, yeah, what does it mean to be a Christian? That would have been Jesus style. But I do think that's part of the problem, is that problem with Pharisees and the problem with Christians is just tell us what we need to do. Just tell us our part. Tell us what we need to do. Let me write it on my list so I can cross it off later. But our God is a creative God. And he created us to be creative. And he's not a dictator. And the Bible shows us that because it's not very specific. If you really look through the Bible, it's not that specific. You look at the 10 Commandments, it's not that specific. Keep the Sabbath holy, don't work. Okay, what does that mean? What's work and what's not work? Don't misuse God's name. Okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? He doesn't tell us. He doesn't tell us. God gives us a lot of leeway to figure things out. Be in his house, relate with him, take up his heart, and then do what he does in your context. So I just have a series of questions for you. Are you scanning the horizon? Are you scanning the horizon and what's out there? You know, I was thinking about that this week. Okay, well, maybe I've been focusing too much on learning different things. You know, I've gotten into my podcast, gotten into some different things. I'm like, am I scanning the horizon? You know, I saw this week we have about 7 Pacesetter girls in our ministry, Pretty much all of them are officers and pace setters. There's only 6 officers and pace setters? I think we have all but one. And then there's 75 girls and pace setters. That's a lot of people on the horizon. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a group that meets here once a week, a pace setters group. And we're going to have them come and invite them to talk about God with us. And as they walk in the door, we're going to throw our arms around them. And we won't kiss them because of Corona, but figuratively, we're going to kiss them. And try to bring them back home. That's the horizon. My neighbor is a Muslim woman who is trying to learn English. She's on the horizon. What have I been doing? What have I been doing? Come on over. Let's have some Turkish tea because that's your jam. And we're going to talk some English. And hopefully we'll get around to talking about Jesus. That's on the horizon. Are you scanning or are you too busy? Too busy with your own stuff, with your job, with your to-do list, with your goals. We can never be too busy to scan the horizon. And are you willing to run? God is a father that runs. The good older brother, Esau, is a brother that runs, though it's costly, though it's undignified, though it's humiliating. Are you willing to run? Can you be embarrassed? Can you be uncomfortable? Can you be awkward? Can you be undignified in order to play your part, in order to run and bring the lost home? And are you willing to throw your arms around a sinner? We just so easily cut people out, don't we? They're too far gone. They would never. We're too quick to give up on people. They know better. They shouldn't be doing that still. I thank God that he didn't say that about me. I thank God that he still doesn't say that about me, because I got a long way to go. Do people have to be good enough for you? Or can you love them and embrace them where they are and bring them home? God is a God who loves finding lost things, and we, his children, should love finding lost things with him. We, the older brothers, we get to live life in the Father's house. And what a good and precious gift that is. Don't you ever begrudge that. Shame on us if we begrudge that. And it's not because we're good, it's because we're his. We get to live life with him. We get to enjoy all the things that come from him, which are all the good things that this world could ever offer. And we, the older brothers, get the privilege and joy of joining him in finding lost things and celebrating them coming home. And so the story ends with a cliffhanger. We don't know what the older brother will do. Will he realize his faulty thinking? Will he embrace his father? Will he go into the party and embrace his brother and celebrate? Or will he stay outside, prideful and ungrateful and totally missing the point? So I hope if you find yourself in those shoes this morning that you'll choose to join the party. That God is inviting us into something better than being good. God is inviting us in to a party that outweighs what this world has to offer. God, I thank you for your goodness. I thank you for inviting us in, for letting us be in your house and be a part of your story. And I pray that we wouldn't miss it, that we wouldn't miss the point, and that we would enjoy being in your house, being in relation with you, and going out and doing what you do. Amen.